So we are looking at PFT 100. This is technically day one. Well, technically, actually, sorry, this is technically day two, even though it is our first day doing an official lecture on this content. So what we're going to do is we're going to treat day two like day one. We're going to treat day three like day two. And we just kind of push everything. And then day seven is a really small day. So we kind of just, I'm going to push those two PowerPoints together on the seventh day before the final. So that's going to move our homework schedule slightly because like we've got 3 pieces of homework technically in most of our, so in all of our 8-day classes, we have 3 pieces of homework, right? Homework on day 2, day 4, and day 6. Now, pushing this class's schedule around actually isn't going to affect this class at all because PFT 100 is our one unique class that doesn't follow the typical 2, 4, 6 homework schedule. PFT 100 is slightly different. You'll notice that you've got homework 1 listed. Actually, do you notice? Yeah, I've got it on screen share. So homework 1 is, and actually I gotta move that. Yeah, no, that can stay here. So homework 1 is based on just like normally on like PowerPoints 1 and 2, right? So nothing fancy there. Now homework 3 is based on like PowerPoints like 6 and 7 or 5 and 6, right? But homework 2 doesn't necessarily actually exist. So the way we normally do this class, we are at Sochi and we have computers available and we have like a basic resume and cover letter format that I walk everybody through how to use. And so then like you go to the library, computer lab, library, whatever you want to call it, and you actually build yourself a cover letter and resume so that you walk out of the end of this. So like the goal of this class by time like the 8th day is wrapped up is that everybody in class has a resume, everybody has a cover letter. And that way, when you get through to capstone at the very end of your Sochi stay, whether or not that's close or far away, you already have like a personal training resume, not just like your, I worked at Applebee's resume, like everybody, or like I've been an independent contractor my whole life, or I've been in a different industry, like you have an actual personal trainer resume ready to go. And that way we can get you sent out on like, finding a job like right away, and we want you to have a basic cover letter as well. Now your cover letter should never be the same for everybody, but having like a simple basic format that allows you to just kind of change small pieces of, that's a really handy thing to have. So rather than having like 15 multiple choice questions the way we normally do it, the homework is having your resume and having your cover letter finished by the end of this class. Does that make sense to everybody? Cool. So that is going to move our homework schedule around slightly. Let me actually, I just need to open it up because I've got it listed there and having trouble seeing it elsewhere. As I moved the PowerPoints around, what does that mean for the actual homeworks? Get out of the way. Homework 2, or homework 1, PowerPoints 1 and 2. Okay. So this is actually, we'll get this homework out, PowerPoints 1 and 2, we'll get this homework out tomorrow actually then, rather than today. So, yeah, I'll send that out. And I'll send that out again in an email later today when we send everything. So today we're just gonna be going over our first PowerPoint, which is going to be in your regular NASM textbook. So this is one of the smaller chapters, and this whole class is basically going to cover some of the stuff you're going to learn in Capstone. So if you go to NASM's website, and you go down to like the resources section or downloads section here at the bottom, one of the things you can download is like the CPT study guide. Which is this kind of cool like summary. It's almost like those summaries that I do for like our final exams, like this really just brief layout of like key information that it kind of blasts through really quick. It's like, there's the muscular system, and there's the skeletal system, and there's the cardiovascular system. And it just kind of blasts through it really fast. And that's on their website as just a really simple study guide of like, if you're going to review stuff in your book, this is like the key stuff to review, you know? But there's another one out there that I cannot, you're not going to find on, I mean, I'm about to find it on the internet, but it's not necessarily just on NASM's website. There's another PDF resource out there that you will have access to once you get your actual NASM account. And speaking of, since we've got a capstone person hanging out with us today, Karina, did you get access to your, have you made your NASM account yet in Capstone?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how we're doing that now, but normally, so what we do is we're like, let's send you to nasm.org, let's make you an account. And then we have these codes that NASM sells us that we place onto your account, and it gives you access to the ability to go take your test. So that's what getting your codes means. So anyway, once you get your codes, you actually will find in there these little resources. Like one of them is like a little 100 question quiz that you can take that simulates what it's like to take the real thing. One of them is like your personal trainer handbook. And the handbook is just like, hey, this is information about like what it means to be a NASM trainer. You need to recertify every 2 years. You need to keep your CPR. If you ever go to a workshop and you want to have credit for that workshop go towards your CEUs, you know, but it's not listed on our website, here's how you can send us the materials, and we'll determine how many points it's worth. So little things like that, that's really cool. But one of the other things that's on there is also the exam blueprint. So take a look here, guys. This is NASM's exam blueprint. So this is actually going to show you where the questions come from in your NASM exam. So domain 1, the type of questions they ask you is basic and applied sciences with nutrition. So if you think about that, that is chapters like the basic and applied sciences, right? That's chapters 1 through 5. That's 2 through 5. Chapter 1 is like an intro chapter, but you know, it's physiology, it's anatomy, bioenergetics, and then also nutrition. So 17 of the 100 questions you have to answer to pass your test are related to that. 18 of the questions are related to assessment, which is why we spend so much time on it. And then 22 plus 21% is spent on like program design, which is why we have so many program design classes, because that's a huge part of the test. And then 12% is spent on client relationships and client relations and behavioral coaching. So that's the exercise psychology side of things, like how to help people, you know, formulate good habits and stuff like that. That's why we have our exercise psychology class, which for all my new folks who have, that'll actually be your final mod. Yeah, and then right here, domain 6, professional development and responsibility. So 10%, not a ton of questions, right? Like if anything, at the most, it's 10 questions out of your 100 questions you have to answer, right? Professional development and responsibility. So it's a really small chapter. It's chapter 20 in your regular textbook. And we're going to be kind of going through that over this course. But because it is only 10% and the chapter is really small, we've also thrown in a little bit of information about how to write a resume and how to write an effective cover letter. So those are two things that are not necessarily something you'll be tested on at NASM. The rest of the stuff is, but it is something we're going to cover in this course. So this course is a little bit of a blend of like straight up from your textbooks, chapter 20, and a little bit of a blend of just stuff that we want to make sure that you have resources so that you're successful out in the real world. Any questions on that? I know that might that might sound a little confusing. Anybody confused on how any of this is working, what we're covering over the next few days? Everybody feeling good? Well, all right then. Chat bubble. All good. All right, so let's go ahead and put this up in the corner, and then we'll do this. Get me a document open. So this is going to be PFT 100, which we're going to call leadership, business, and good Lord, and sales. So leadership, business, and sales. This is going to be day 2, PowerPoint 1, which is where to work. So this is just going to be some basic information on the different gyms that are out there. Okay. So chapter 20, where to work, right? So we want to be able to understand by the end of this chapter, not that I haven't introed you guys to death already, but here's a little bit more intro. We want to be able to describe, today we want to be able to describe the qualities of uncompromising customer service. That's actually, to be fair, that's something we're going to get to at the end of this course. But we're going to describe the strategies for finding an ideal workplace. That's really something we are looking for. The processes for writing a resume, 4 P's of marketing, and basic membership techniques. That's kind of what we're going over in this course. So when it comes to running a successful personal training business, you got to know a little bit of the difference between like what it's like to work for a company versus something that's very common in our industry, which is independent contracting. So if you're working for like a gym, right? Like let's say you're just straight up working for a gym, a lot of times you will be on like a W-4. You will be an employee of that gym. Now that could be, commission based. It could be hourly. Like both of those things don't determine whether or not you're an employee. An employee is just somebody who is directly like your money is earned by the company, and then the company pays you your rate to be an employee. Whereas an independent contractor, the money still goes through the company, but they pay you on a session to session basis, and you are not necessarily an employee. Or an independent contractor will be somebody who works within the walls of a certain company and then takes money directly. So like you're again not on their actual payroll. And the big difference here is like a tax thing. One is a W-4 and one is a 1099. By the way, just I always point this out, but do you think you'd be talking about taxes when you sign up for personal training school? This is it, by the way. We're going to wrap it up in 5 minutes. But the big difference between like an employee and an independent contractor. So your taxes, they kind of go in 2 different directions. So like when you're an employee, like I know that we all get like, if you've ever been an employee before, you get your paycheck and you look at your pay stub and you're like, oh man, freaking taxes. They're taking that money out of my taxes, right? Like they're taking that money out of my wages. So what we don't oftentimes realize is that the company we work for is also paying taxes on us as an employee. So like, we pay, let's say like you paid, $100 into like federal income tax, right? Well, your company also paid on that federal income tax for you as an employee. Whereas a 1099, so that's how employees work. If you are an independent contractor, though, you will notice you do not have to pay federal income tax on your wages because you are being given directly like income money. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't need to pay federal income tax. Like, it does not mean that you don't have to pay taxes. It just means that the company did not send that tax money away. You're getting basically the entire like chunk of cash that you earn in that time. And that sounds really great, but it doesn't mean that you don't have to pay those taxes. Those taxes still need to be paid at the end of the year, or if you want to do quarterly or whatever. So that means that like you're going to need to set some of that money aside, because I'll tell you the big mistake that I made the first time I did like independent contracting and did like my own business for the first time is like I did not set enough aside out of every paycheck. And then the end of the year came and I still had to pay taxes, and I was like, well, I don't have that kind of money right now, because I spent it all on video games. I don't know what I spent it on. Probably more equipment for my business, because I also didn't know how to write stuff off back in the day. But like at the time, like I hadn't set enough aside, so when my taxes came, like it was a big chunk that I had to pay. And luckily, like they'll work with you. I was able to like delay that, and I had income tax money, like a tax return money from my W, because I was working at also like a job at the time. So like when that money came back around, I was like, haha, I got my tax return back so that I can pay my taxes. Either way, though, it worked out. So that is something to be aware of. Like there are benefits to being an independent contractor. Like the benefit is obviously like when you get to keep all of that money, you can then do something with it. Like you can choose to invest that money throughout the year. You can make it work for you. So there's benefits there. The other benefit of being an independent contractor is because you are not necessarily an employee of the company, you are on a session to session basis. Like you're not an employee, you are a service that the company is hiring for that job. If you don't like that company's policies, you don't necessarily have to follow them. Now, does that mean you're going to get picked up again and then have work later if you don't follow their policies? Well, probably not. But you have a lot more freedom to be an individual when you're an independent contractor. And that sounds really great. But again, remember, this is all on a session to session basis. So if that leads to like your work all of a sudden drying up with no notice, you could be in a poor situation. So there's definitely like advantages and disadvantages to being an employee versus an independent contractor. Generally, what a lot of personal trainers do, which is very common, is they will often have like a steady source of income job where they work regularly for a gym, and then they will also do independent contracting on the side, session to session. And until now, I've kind of been describing independent contracting as like working for a company. If I were also to simply be paid by like an individual, if I were to go to somebody's house and train them in their living room and be like, hey, my sessions are $80 an hour, then they give me an $80 check every session. That is also a form of independent contracting. The person is paying you on a session to session basis. Now, by the way, like don't do that. Don't do session to session. That's way too much paperwork. Sell your client packages, and re-up every month, monthly or bi-monthly or something. But that's an example of how that works. Any questions on that so far? So we have a little bit of perspective as we move into the rest of the stuff. Cool. So we'll start by talking about like what it's like to work for a business, right? Let's talk about like where to work, like what types of gyms are actually out there. So one thing that's really important, and you'll see this in your textbook. Okay, this is we're gonna go full opinionated here. I said this stuff is really important. This stuff honestly is not that important on like the day-to-day. It's something that you're gonna hear, and then you may get a test question related to it, but then like it'll never affect your life in any capacity in the future. But there is a company called the it's so hard to say, IHRSA. That's the International Health Racquetball Sports Association. Yeah, racquetball actually gets its own little shout out here in the name, because when gyms first started, that was actually a really big deal. It was like, do you have racquetball? And basically what that company is they're like, they're almost like a homeowners association. They're almost like a committee or like a company that everybody belongs to, right? So they recommend that any personal trainer working in a gym that is like a member of their association they recommend to that gym that any trainers they hire have a certification that is certified by an accrediting body recognized by the US government. That governing body is the NCCA, and that's, oh, I'm going to screw this up. The National, I think it's Council or Committee, NCCA, National Commission for Certifying Agencies. So this NCCA is basically a company that exists like under the government that makes sure that there is a standard for somebody wanting to call themselves a certified personal trainer. So like, let's say you decide to start a website and you are going to call yourself a health and wellness expert, right? Like I start a website, right? I put it up on the internet and I'm like, I am Brad Thompson, health and wellness expert. You know, so in the eyes of the government, there is no such thing as a health and wellness expert. That is not like a thing that exists. Just like there's no such thing, sounds interesting, but there's no such thing as a nutritionist either. That one always surprises people. Where we're like, whoa, 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 I see the word nutritionist thrown around all the time. Yeah, well, that may be something somebody calls themselves, but in the eyes of like the US government, nutritionist like doesn't exist. There are registered dietitians that exists, right? And that's why like they have certain rules and regulations they have to follow. Registered dietitians have to keep their license up to date. They have to do continuing education in order to call themselves a registered dietitian. If they don't meet any of those requirements, the government says, well, you're not a registered dietitian anymore, right? So the same thing is true of personal trainers. I could call myself a wellness expert. You guys can call yourself a trainer right now. You know, you guys know how to do push-ups and you got some information on how to do assessments. Like you guys can put somebody through a workout, but you are not a certified personal trainer. You're not a CPT. You can call yourself a trainer, right? And that's what happens all the time. I see that constantly. You're gonna notice it. It's weird. It's like a veil. Once you get your certification, it's like a veil is lifted and you start to see all the trainers that are out there that are not trainers. But you're going to see stuff like that consistently. The difference is like, let's say somebody sprains their ankle during their session, right? You're working out in a gym and somebody else, like you were responsible, right? You did everything you're supposed to do, but somebody else left a dumbbell laying around. Your client who is there to meet with you tripped over this other person's dumbbell and they sprained their ankle. And now they're like, hey, you put me in an environment where I sprained my ankle. This is your fault. I need you to cover my medical bills. And you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, I had nothing to do with that dumbbell on the ground. Like, you knew the risks coming in, right? So like, let's say all of that, you present all of that. And this person's like, well, all right, I'm gonna sue you and take you to the court over it. You go to court over it, and the judge is gonna look at your information and go, all right, well, are you an expert in the field? And you're gonna go, yes, I am. Like, I know all about anatomy and physiology. I know how to train people. I know about the exercises. I know about this. I know about that. And the judge is going to go, okay, prove it. If you don't have certification, there's no way to prove that you know what you're talking about. And, you know, don't get me wrong. I know plenty of people who have let their certifications lapse and therefore they are not certified. And they're some of the smartest trainers I know. It's not that you don't know it, but if you are not able to prove it, you are going to be held liable. So that's one reason why certification is so important, because you need to be able to like be covered. Like if you go to court over this and the judge says, are you an expert in the field? And you go, yes, I am. And you show that you're all up to date and you've got continuing education, like you have all that proof. Then what ends up happening, he goes, I believe that you are an expert in the field. And then accidents in gyms happen. There is a certain degree of assumed risk. And so then like you are protected. And that's why certification is so important. And that's why the NCCA exists. That's the certification, is the NCCA. So you guys are here to study to get your National Academy of Sports Medicine CPT. NASM is a private company that offers a test to prove to the NCCA that you know what you're talking about. And so then the NCCA makes, like, NASM has all these rules to follow. The reason they had to wear that exam blueprint that I showed you just a minute ago, that has to exist. Like, that's part of the rules that the NCCA makes NASM follow. I know I'm throwing a lot of letters around. People are like, ugh. It's like we got a lot of friggin' acronyms in this class, at least on this day. But like, why is the test 100 questions? Why? Because the NCCA made that rule. So you could go get ACSM certification. They certify personal trainers. You could go get ACE. They certify personal trainers. ISSA, NESTA. There's a ton of personal training certifications out there. I don't know that much about all of them because I'm certified through NASM, but like all of those companies answer to the NCCA. So that is the company that kind of accredits you, that actually like backs up your CPT, certified personal trainer certification. Now, can you work without it? In certain states, yes. Now, in certain states, it is illegal to like call yourself a trainer. Like you can't even like work out with somebody and like charge for your services unless you have a CPT. That's actually not that's actually not how it is in California. California, you can train people without certification. You still can't call yourself a certified personal trainer because you're not, but you can call yourself something else. In this state, that's actually allowed. But how likely are you to get a job at like a Gold's Gym? Can Gold's Gym legally hire you if you are not a certified personal trainer? Or can 24-hour fitness, actually, this is a good question. We'll ask Kenny because Kenny used to work at Gold's. Kenny, can Gold's
Yes.
hire you? Are they allowed to hire you if you do not have a certified personal trainer certification?
Not anymore, and that's been for a long time. So yeah, well, definitely, you need to have certification. That's like one of the, to even get into the door and apply, they'll ask you if you have it. And if you don't have it, they'll turn you away.
Totally.
But let me ask you a question. So is that for if you want to train, or can you be a desk person or whatever?
Oh, no, yeah, it's for training.
It's just for training. So you can get hired there, but just not as a trainer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so okay. So here's the thing, and Kenny, you might not have, I could be wrong. You actually have worked for Gold. So this next part is speculation. But if Gold's is exactly like 24 and they're like LA Fit, if they're like any of the other chains, here's the dirty secret. They actually are legally allowed to hire you as a trainer according to like California and the United States.
Yeah.
But all of those commercial gyms are members of this private organization, the IHRSA. See, it's all coming back around. The International Health Racquetball Sports Association. And part of like having their little seal on the door is that they all agree to follow their rules, which are probably rules about like, you will hire janitors to wipe down equipment every night. You will have this many toilets and this many showers per square foot. There's probably like all kinds of these weird little rules that they have. One of those rules is that they will only hire trainers who are certified personal trainers. So this is where it's weird. It's like, that's not necessarily a legal thing, but it is a thing that all of the gyms have agreed to. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I could be wrong on that. I could be wrong. Like maybe Gold's isn't even a member of the IHR. I think most commercial gyms are, but like maybe they're not even a member of that. I don't know Gold's personally, but I know that LA Fitness. I know 24. Bally's used to be, but Bally's is like gone at this point. I know that those ones actually are. So that's what the IHRSA.
Do you know What are the gyms that you know of personally that have hired people without a certification?
So the rules have gotten a little more lenient. Like some companies have sort of pushed. Okay, I'll answer this in two different ways. Like we'll answer it in like the super official way, and then we'll answer it in the way that like sometimes it just happens. Some companies have actually implemented policies. They've gotten permission to be like, hey, what if we hire somebody who agrees to get their personal trainer certification in the next 30 days? And some companies have been like implementing more and more and more of that, just because there is like Maggie, we were just talking about this like before anybody else got on the call, but like the need for personal trainers has only like skyrocketed. Like it's not slowing down. It has actually picked up even during like the previous recession and everything. It's just been on an uphill rise since. And so there's less and less trainers to go around. So some companies have been asking, for the ability to kind of like hire if this person agrees to get like a certification in X number of days. So that's I know some gyms do that. And I'm sure that they can only get away with that if the IHRSA agreed to it. Unless, and here's the second kind of version of this answer, unless that manager knows how to possibly like, I know that like sometimes there are people who don't follow the rules, and I have definitely known those managers in gyms that I've worked at. Not that I'm approving or disapproving of them, although I think you guys know how much I like to follow rules.
Yeah, makes sense.
Those guys will sometimes like push the envelope. Like a lot of times it's like, they will hire somebody who doesn't have it, and they'll kind of just like, fingers crossed they get that certification finished in time before, our quarterly check, so, what is the likelihood that you can get hired? Well, if there are rule breakers, the likelihood goes up. But do you want to be at a place where like all of a sudden maybe that guy gets caught and then you lose your job? I definitely don't recommend it.
Brad.
Sounds like an awful situation. I was going to say this real quick, guys. Planet Fitness does hire people without a certification, and they train them for a month, and then they put them, to work. So I know that perfect.
So Planet Fitness, I'm not sure. I wonder if Planet Fitness is part of the IHRSA. So that is legal, like I said. Like, and this is where like smaller gyms usually are not members of the IHRSA, right? Like, it's like a company that kind of all the commercial ones are sort of like a part of. But like, smaller gyms, and apparently maybe Planet Fitness, they don't necessarily have to do that. But Planet Fitness will have you get a smaller certification that is proof of like, it's like proof of like you went to school to become like a trainer, but those certifications are often not covered by the NCCA. So they're really small certifications that like if you, like a good example of this, if you can take a test at home, that is not covered by the NCCA. Now your CEU tests, right? Like your CES certification, your corrective, your FNS, your nutrition. If you decide to get the PES, that's the sports, sub, the reason I call those sub certifications, you do take those tests at home. And so you could be like, hey, I'm a certified, you get the NASM BCS. I'm a certified behavior change specialist, right? That is not, you took that test at home. That is not an NCCA. That's not a government level certification. So for you to walk into a gym and be like, hey, I'm a corrective exercise specialist, you're a CES trainer, and they're like, great, show us your CPT, and you don't have it, it doesn't matter that you have arguably I think that the CES is a harder certification to get. Doesn't matter. It's not on this level. It's not a government level. So that's kind of how that works. I'm curious though. Planet
Brad.
Fitness,
Brad.
IHRSA. Yeah, what's up?
It sounds like the necessity for certification for the larger gyms are more liability based. So if they hire a trainer that's not certified and something happens, this large gym is liable.
Exactly.
And they're get sued. So it sounds like, you know, they're not going to take the chances of hiring somebody that's not certified if they're going to get in trouble for anything that happens.
Totally. At least 9 out of 10 times, or 99 out of 100 times. I'm not going to go on and speak in super general terms and just say that, like, you know, it's 100% true, because you know, you guys know me. I tend to try not to be very absolute about stuff, because we live in a world of nuance, you know. I'm sure there is a gym out there that will maybe hire you without it, but, like, you know, that is this small, tiny little, like, lottery chance versus, like, having your certification, which you can walk in and knock out, you know. So that's the thing. So I don't want anybody to walk out of this class thinking it's illegal to show somebody how to do a bicep curl, you know. I'm sure some of our students right now are taking what you've learned in class and probably applying it to their friends and family. That is not against the law. Like, let me be clear. However, is it a skill that's going to really serve you for the rest of your career the same way a certification will? That I can say with confidence, definitely not. So that's how certifications work. By the way, I think the IHRSA is part of Planet Fitness. They wouldn't have given them an award if they hadn't. Basically, the IHRSA, somebody said this in class, and I just remembered this. Somebody said this the last time I taught this class. You guys know those commercials for cars? I don't know nothing about cars, but you know how, like, you see the JD Power and Associates? Like, I've been hearing that I know that name. JD Power and Associates. It's the freaking thing that all those car commercials brag about for, like, my whole life. I have no idea what that means, but I do know that, like, they must be like the IHRSA. They're just a company that gives awards. Like, that's what the IHRSA is. They're just a governing body of people that probably have, like, a seal of approval that gyms like to, you know, hang up on their wall. So is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? No. That's kind of the end of the conversation there. So in addition to certification, higher education such as a college degree or some science-related field, exercise science, exercise phys, kines, will enhance your marketability. However, again, even having, like, a degree in exercise science doesn't guarantee you a job in most gyms. You could have a kinesiology degree, but if you don't maintain certification, you know, they don't put that much emphasis on it. You do want to make sure that you maintain your certification too. That's another thing we're going to talk about in this course. You have, in order to be certified, you don't just have to pass your test one time. Every 2 years, you need to get what are called what NASM calls CEUs. Some people call it CECs. There's other terms for it. But CEUs are continuing education units. And basically, it's a class that is worth a certain number of points. And you have to earn 2.0 points every 2 years. And a point is equal to about 10 contact hours, basically, is how it works. So basically, you need to do about 20 hours of study every 2 years in order to recertify. Point one of those, by the way, will be your CPR. So technically, you actually only need to earn 1.9. But you have to, like, turn in proof of CPR every 2 years to NASM. And you have to turn in every 2 years proof of you have done your continuing education. Now, just so you guys are aware, part of the deal with signing up for Sochi is that you guys are actually going to have your first 2 years covered, because not only are you getting your NASM, your regular NASM, like the CPT, you are also getting access to the CES and the FNS, that's corrective and nutrition. Those are actually each individually worth 2.0. So by getting both of them, you're actually earning 4.0. However, it does not certify you for 4 years. It resets every 2. So it doesn't work that way. And you can't save it either. It'll expire after a year. Like, they don't want us to do that. So, you know, you're going to walk out the day you get your certification, your 2-year timer will start. And you'll need to know that date. That date will become very important for you. For me, it's February 27th. which let me tell you is a really crappy date to have it on because leap years and stuff. It's not actually the 28th, but it's like so close that it breaks my brain every 2 years. But February 27th, that's a very important date for me because that's the day I have to turn in my paperwork or before it every 2 years. And so, you know, the day you get your certification, your 2-year timer will start. And at some point within that 2 years, what most trainers do is they wait, you know, 90 days before it's up and then turn all their paperwork in. It doesn't matter when you do it. As long as you have done it within the 2-year period, you're covered. So if you took, let's say, a TRX workshop a year ago, and your date is coming up, you can file that paperwork from a year and a half ago, or you know, 1 year and 11 months and 29 days ago. You know, like if you did it the day after, you can do that. So it just has to happen sometime within that 2 years. So we'll talk more about that in the next coming days. And then we cover this all again in Capstone because that's where it starts to become really relevant. It's like, hey, you're about to go out in the world. You need to know how your CEUs work. Okay, so a little bit sidetracked there, but let's go ahead and dive back into where to work. So we're going to talk about the different types of gyms that are out there. So it is important to facilitate the skills that you've learned. There are a lot of different places out there. There's things like the YMCA. The YMCA is a great place to start. The pay is not super awesome, but the volume is great. And this is one thing that is also opinionated. I know I'm kind of diving into a lot of personal experience here and not stuff that's in your book. A lot of the stuff I'm saying in this class doesn't necessarily help you pass your test. It's just information that I've kind of talked to with other trainers. This is a lot of my personal experience. But I've never worked for the YMCA, but I used to work for LA Fitness. And there is an advantage to crazy high volume at low pay if you can afford to, like, you know, do it. Obviously, if you can't pay your rent, don't work in a place like that. But I did not enjoy working for LA Fitness. I had a horrible time there. I really didn't appreciate it. It wasn't that they treated me poorly, by the way. LA Fitness did not treat me poorly. Like when I see trainers like complain about how they're being treated by LA Fitness, I'm kind of surprised because I'm like, they don't treat you poorly. They just nothing you. They don't train you. They don't take time to like get to know you. They nothing you, which means like they can't really treat you poorly if they nothing you. Now don't get me wrong, they're not treating you well either. Like it's, you know, like there were literally times where I wouldn't, you know, learn my managers. Two times I had managers, I had no idea what their name was. Never met them. I had my existing clients. I had a list of people I was training, you know, and at one point, this guy I worked with, Caleb, was like, you want to go meet the new guy? And I was like, I'm gonna go see the new Avengers movie. I'm out. You know, like, never met the guy, and he was gone like a month later. Never learned his name. Fun story, by the way, that came back to bite me in the ass. Turns out that guy knew who I was and was friends with another friend of mine. And at one point, that friend called me and had me on speaker. And he was like, hey, I'm here with an ex-manager of yours. And I was like, I know his name now. We'll say Mike. He's like, I'm here with Mike. And I was like, who? He's like, Mike. And I was like, who? He's like, he used to be your manager. I'm on speakerphone. He's like, used to be your manager. And I was like, I don't know who that is. I never had a manager named Mike. And like the dude was right there. So very, very awkward. But that's what working in a big box gym sometimes is like. It can be very faceless. So they don't necessarily treat you better, but I definitely didn't like working there because I didn't like how they treated their members. Like I thought they treated my clients like crap. They had very stringent contracts. You know, I thought it was pretty BS. And this is all from 10 years ago, so things may have changed at this point. But I also made very, very, very little per hour money. Like I was making $15 an hour when I first started being a trainer. And that was my hourly rate. But here's the thing. LA Fitness was 30-minute sessions. Okay. So that means, and I would usually work from 6 a.m. to like 11 p.m., let's say. So 6, 6:30, 7, 7:30, 8, 8. Those are all my open slots, right? if I had a client from 6 to 6:30, but I just couldn't find somebody from 6:30 to 7, but then I do have a client from 7 to 7:30, that half-hour gap, you do not get paid for. So like LA Fitness is technically 15 an hour, or at least it was. But in reality, it was $7.50 a session. And some trainers just like didn't necessarily have that mentality. So if I worked an 8-hour day, but I had a 1-hour gap, I got paid for 7 hours. So very, very low pay at the time. But again, this was right in the middle of the beginning of like the really bad recession. So like I was grateful to have what I had. And you know, you're not supposed to do this, but I did get a lot of like private clients out of those relationships that I built at, you know, at LA Fitness. A lot of those people were like, hey, I'm paying this much in a contract. Can I pay you session to session and you train me in my living room? And I'd be like, great, let's do it, you know? So then I started doing that. So I'm still grateful for the time that I had there. By the way, gyms do not want you to do that. So I'm not giving you advice to do that. However, I don't think that anybody out there can say that like this isn't something that regularly happens. So here's the thing though. So as much as I dislike that and as much as I dislike the low pay, I look back on my time at LA Fitness and I'm actually very grateful for it. I am glad that I worked there because I learned very quickly the value of learning how to like move my sessions to get them as built up as possible and efficient as possible. So I learned how to communicate with my clients and be like, hey, my 6:30 cancels. You want to come at 6:30? Boom, call the next one. Da-da-da-da. You know, like all of that stuff in like 5 minutes, you know, between sessions or something. And because it was so back to back to back, it taught me that I need to be really clear with how I describe things. I need to be able to get somebody on the floor and exercising properly in as little time as possible. And I need to make sure that my clients are doing their warm-ups effectively, like without my help. So I learned how to like guide my, you know, my clients more effectively. And eventually that's probably what led me to being you know, personal training teacher. That's probably what gave me the skills necessary to know how to explain this stuff well. So I'm grateful. And if you want to work in a place like the YMCA or in a place like LA Fitness, I actually do recommend it for a very short period of time. If you are financially stable, it can be a really terrific learning experience, even though it kind of sucks to work there. So that's my take on places like the YMCA, LA. And by the way, YMCA treats their people really well. They're a good organization. I'm not lumping them in with some of the more evil ones out there. Other places that you can work are places like local town recreation and park centers. If you do decide to be an independent contractor, you can work in like rec centers. I used to teach one of the first things that I ever did that was independent contracting, and I was talking about this earlier, was when I did my boot camps. And I did them at first at a Pan Pacific Park down by Park La Brea, because that's where I live. And then Barry's boot camp came along, and I was immediately driven out of there because my little boot camp could not keep up with Barry's. But then I moved into a different place over in West Hollywood, went to a rec center over there, and they were like, yeah, you're allowed to train your clients out of here, and we'll, you know, let you do it rent free. And I was like, well, that's incredible. They were like, the only catch is you have to offer a group personal training class twice a month for free and invite the entire community. And I was like, great, piece of cake. Are you kidding me? Like, I'm going to do a free advertising thing. Like, the rule is that you're making me advertise. Break my arm, why don't you? You know? So local rec centers are another really great place to train. There are also like niche training facilities. So niche training facilities are like Maggie, you do a lot of like boxing and stuff, right? That's a niche training facility. Like your gym probably has dumbbells, right? It probably has maybe a cable machine or a lat pull down machine. Probably got a pull
Yeah,
bar
we
in
have
there,
all
right?
the weight training stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got a lot. Does it have a squat rack?
No, we have like the ab, you know, the ab.
The bench.
Bench
Yeah.
thing, yeah, and
Yeah.
then we have cables, and we have dumbbell.
Yeah,
barb.
but you're not necessarily, you don't have like a lot of the very traditional like barbell stuff,
Oh
right?
yeah, oh yeah. All the barbells from like 5 to I don't know 50.
Those are dumbbells. The big, the 45-pound Olympic bar. Like
Yeah, we have that. Yeah, we have
oh,
that. And the
you can
weights.
do like like heavy duty
Yeah,
squats.
yeah. And the octagon one, I don't know, octagon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, with
So
weights.
okay, so you've got a pretty good amount of strength training equipment, which is nice. But primarily, like your gym is a boxing studio, right? That's a niche.
Yeah.
When you go to a place like Orange Theory Fitness, right? Orange Theory Fitness is not about traditional strength training. It's about the Orange Theory method of like cardio mixed with light weights, right? So if you go to a TRX studio, right? There are these group exercise TRX studio. That's that suspension strap that you'll see people do, right? There are niche training studios. Even things like yoga. Yoga is a niche within the health and wellness community, right? So there are like places to work like that. Now, that's really cool because a lot of times those places actually give you a really good hourly rate. So you'll often get like a lot per hour. However, a lot of times those places also, because they're often group exercise oriented, they thrive on like offering their clientele like variety. So a lot of times you won't work more than 1 or 2 sessions at a time. So you'll get a really good hourly rate, but then like if you want to keep that hourly rate going, you're gonna have to drive to your other company that you work for. And so like, maybe you work at Yoga Works doing TRX, and then down the street you work at, Orange Theory where you do some spin stuff. Like maybe you're all over the place. And so those are niche training facilities.
Is F45 a niche?
F45 is like a boot camp. Yeah. F45 and Orange Theory are kind of similar in concept. They're basically like a pre-made group exercise thing. F45 is a little more boot campy. And by the way, like Orange Theory kind of breaks the rule I just mentioned. They will hire you for a couple hours at a time. They actually do shifts, which is nice. So their hourly actually is a little bit lower because of that. So that's kind of what that looks like. And then at the end of our list here, we see commercial fitness clubs, which is probably what a lot of people kind of jump to when they think of like working for a gym. 24-Hour Fitness, Gold's Gym, LA Fitness, all of those really, big ones that are out there. Crunch, Planet Fitness even, those are all commercial gyms. So let's go ahead and break down our definitions for each, because them's the test questions, and we have not had any notes so far. So all of them are unique. All of them have certain functions and reporting structures and things like that. And so we need to kind of be aware of all of these, because you want to find like where you're going to fit in. Like at this point, I'm older and wiser and have been in the fitness industry for a longer period of time than I used to. And so now I've got opinions which make me grumpy. So because of that, I might not necessarily want to work in certain gyms, So I need to make sure that when I'm job hunting, I'm searching for a gym that I'm going to be effective at and that I'm going to enjoy. That's the same situation for anybody, whether or not you are getting older and crankier or not. So we need to kind of evaluate what those key characteristics are. So looking at the different types of places to work. Oh boy. So you have got large scale fitness facilities. These are your big, often referred to as like big box gyms. This is not a real definition. This is just kind of like what you're going to hear a lot, but we'll call them a big box gyms, right? Oftentimes they are very branded. They have multiple locations. They're really large in size. So they often have like specific branding, multiple locations. Oh, good Lord. Locate ions. I doubled That's so funny. Multiple locations. Most of the revenue in the fitness industry is located in these large scale facilities. They are the largest employer of fitness professionals and make up most of the revenue generated in the fitness industry. And most of that revenue, by the way, is actually not from personal training. Personal training is actually a very small part of the revenue generated by most gyms. Most money generated by gyms is in membership dues. Most of the money is generated by how much they are earning passively in people who have a gym membership. I mean, how many people do you know have a gym membership that don't actually use it? Heck, I got a membership to Crunch I'm not allowed to use right now. Oh my God, I'm part of the problem. So those are your large scale fitness facilities. But here's the thing with large scale fitness facilities. They are trying to appeal to as many people as possible. So they want to get as many members as possible. And the way that they're going to do that is by offering a little bit of everything. There are often machines that are very unintimidating for clients to go and to participate in. They know they can sit down. It's got a picture, shows them how to do it. They feel like they're working out. And they are, like those have a purpose. There is 1 or 2 squat racks. There's 1 or 2. Nowadays, we're starting to see more and more bounce plates show up in commercial gyms. You'll see these functional training areas is what they usually call them, where you'll see like barbells and bounce lifts and stuff. That stuff's getting more popular thanks to places like CrossFit. We're seeing a little like 1 or 2 boxing bags. We'll see like 1 or 2 medicine balls. So they'll have a little bit of everything. And that way, they're appealing to as many people as possible. They'll often have a pool. They'll often have childcare. They'll have a spa. So their big thing here is that they are very focused on sales. They're very focused on, driving in as many numbers as possible, because you got to remember, these places also have plenty of numbers going in the opposite direction as well. Like these people who are signing up, they have their gym membership for 6 months, never once walked in that door, never used it. And so they finally realize it's still on their credit card and they cancel the darn thing. So there's a lot of outgoing business as well. So because of this, they want to make sure that you have as much incoming business as possible. So the general clientele we're going to see, if we look at it, if you want to work in a place like this, you need to know who you are marketing to in order to be able to bring in as many people as possible. Usually they are going to be families and focused on multi-age activities. So when you're looking at a lot of these gyms, a lot of times they are people who are getting like a family membership, a husband and wife that can sign up together with their kids, or maybe they just get like a kids club membership. Usually people who are like more family oriented. They've got a regular 9-to-5 job and they can go to the gym either before or after work. That is the most common population you're going to see. Occasionally you're going to get like the retired person, as well, who just has a membership there. Occasionally you'll get like a college student. But generally the most popular like population you're going to see are average working adults. They are usually populations who live or work in the neighborhood. And that's going to lead me to putting this little note that is not in the PowerPoint here, but this is often a question on the actual test. This is one you're going to see in Capstone, is going to be this right here. The number one factor that people consider when choosing a gym is location. The number one thing people figure, oh, I just realized that you're probably taking notes. People do not care, people care about price. I'm not saying they don't. People care about amenities. Does it have a hot tub? People care about all that stuff, but the number one thing that determines whether or not somebody's going to sign up for a gym is how close it is to their house. So a lot of times these gyms are built into areas that are still in somewhat metropolitan areas, but close to where lots and lots of people live. They often are financially conservative. So they're looking for, you know, a cheap membership price. I mean, that's actually something that first drew me in when I looked at Crunch. You know, I got a freaking notice on my, I'd been a member of LA Fitness because it's close to my house for quite some time. And then I got a freaking letter in the gym that there was a Crunch that was equally as close, but they could beat the price. And I was like, great. You know, and they all it needs, as long as there's a squat rack that I can get onto like regularly and, you know, dumbbells, I'm happy. And sure enough, it had everything I needed. So financially more conservative. These are typically the people who prefer a la carte access. And that means that like they have amenities that they can choose to take advantage of whenever they want. Is there a hot tub that they can just go to the gym and just use the hot tub? A lot of times people will actually have their membership just for the pool, you know, and they never touch the gym. Met a lot of clients like that and changed their mind. But like that is a very typical client that you will see here. Now their organizational setting. Typically what they're looking for is they do have like professional trainer onboarding. So what that means is like management has been through extensive training for how to onboard new employees. So a lot of times the organizational setting is set up because like the manager, like the fitness manager has been through training. They know how to be like, all right, so it's your first day of work. Welcome. You know, you should have gotten an email from me a couple of days ago that said to bring your ID and your social security so we can get all of your paperwork filled out. I'm going to send you over to our HR department. You're going to get knocked out there. That'll take you about 20 minutes. Come see me and I'm going to give you a tour of like the locker rooms. You know, like they have like a very specific speech. They've been through it a million times. They know exactly how to onboard new people, which makes sense because there's going to be a pretty high turnover rate in gyms like this as well. A lot of trainers that maybe don't necessarily know how to do, you know, sales, and so they wash out. You know, they have to have a good onboarding experience. That being said, when we talk about interviewing later in this course, doesn't mean that just because they know how to do it, it means that they want to do it. They want to hire you. They will often offer complimentary new assessments. So a lot of times, one thing that you are going to have to make room for in your schedule, trainers will need to make room for complimentary fitness assessments in their schedule for the opportunity for sales. So a lot of times when you're working in most commercial gyms, you're going to have to do some version of like membership selling. Oh, sorry, that's not true. Not membership selling, training session selling. So you're going to have to sell yourself. You're going to have to sell your services, which means that like you need to be able to have like a fitness assessment. That's really one of the reasons why fitness assessments are also so important, guys. Like a fitness assessment is where you get to break down everything for somebody and show them your value. And they go, holy crap, this, you know, person knows exactly what it is they're talking about. I want to get training from this person, you know? That is the key to, I mean, like, you see, I know sales sometimes has like this dirty connotation, you know, like a lot of times we think of salespeople, we think of like sleazy car salesman. You know, we think of like Danny DeVito from the movie Matilda, you know, like, but that's really not what I love sales, you know? I believe that like I have a positive effect on people's lives and I can't help anybody unless they have a gym membership, you know? So your fitness assessment is where you really get to show your first little bit of value here. And so a lot of times you actually have to kind of bite the bullet and work for an hour that you're not getting paid for the opportunity to maybe sell somebody on like a new session. But at the same time, those free fitness sessions are offered by almost all commercial gyms. You're also a lot of times going to get some assistance. You'll have management that assists in new fitness professionals in building a lead base. So when we get to sales, we'll talk about like what leads are, but basically a lot of times in most commercial gyms, they will have a list of people who have training who have not actually used their training. So a lot of times what will happen is somebody will buy a package of, let's say 100 sessions. Like that's a lot, but we'll use that as an example. And they trained with this guy, Bob, for 6 months and went through a bunch of those sessions. And then Bob got hired to go work at a different gym. And so he left, and then that member was supposed to come in and try to find a new trainer, but they never did. And then they kind of forgot about it and they fell out of the habit. And now they just got this person who has like 40 unused sessions on their account. So here's what's interesting about that. When you hear that, you kind of think, well, what does the gym care? That gym has the money from those 40 sessions, right? Well, here's the thing. And this is a little bit of like how this is how big gyms do it, and also honestly how you should do it if you ask me. My advice to you. But when they get the initial payment from a training session, that money goes into an account that is like hey, they bought this thing from us account, right? And then what happens is when they redeem that session, money is moved from that account to the company's like spending account. By the way, this is a really great way for you to set up your own finances. If you get a client who signs up for 50 sessions, let's say you're charging $100 a session. You just made $5,000. That's awesome. Congratulations. I do not recommend going out and buying a $5,000 car that day. Or spending that $5,000 on a down payment that day. That is not my advice to you, because here's the thing: they now have 50 sessions that you are going to have to use up over time, which is time out of your schedule. My recommendation to you is that you pay yourself a paycheck weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever. When you get money from a client, put it into an account and then move that money into your spending account, into your checking account, like whenever they redeem a session, or at the end of the month when you can count up how many sessions they redeemed. You don't want to run into a situation where you have 1 million sessions to go train and you're not getting any money because they spent it a long time ago and then you spent all that money. That's how gyms do it as well, actually. Even places like LA Fitness, even places like 24 Hour Fitness, these big gyms do the same thing. So there is a incentive for those gyms to get you to burn through those sessions. So they'll give you a list of phone numbers, be like, call this guy Bob. Wait, Bob was the trainer. Call this guy Jim. He's got 20 unused sessions. And then, there's also incentive there, because if you do a really good job, maybe Jim decides to sign up for 20 more sessions, So that's a lead base. And often big gyms will help you with those. So it gives you a pretty good list of like places to start building your leads. Now, a disadvantage is you often have little control over your scheduled work hours. Let's do a fun little survey here. Who in this call has ever had a boss that asked them to work at a certain time that is just not convenient for you to work, and you've asked your boss to reschedule and be like, hey, I'd actually really prefer this shift to this shift, and you're like, your boss is like, got it, and then never reschedules you? Raise your hand.
Me. It's
Yeah.
happened.
Good Lord knows I have. That is 90% of what my job is at Sochi, actually. You would think it would be lecturing you guys. But a lot of my job is having conversations with people that are like, hey, why aren't you in class? And it's like, because my boss scheduled me for this hour. And I'm like, yep, that makes sense. I need you to go talk to your boss and be like, listen, I told you I'm going to school from 8:30 to 1:30 or from 5:30 to 10:30. I need you to not schedule me for a 5:30 shift. We call that assertiveness training. That's the like, listen here. And it's only half successful. But we've all been in that situation. That is very common in commercial gyms. A lot of times you're a number. This manager just has a time slot to fill. They need somebody to train. Your name popped up. They put you on the schedule. Now, that being said, by the way, you can absolutely get beyond that within your first 6 months. I've only done the commercial gym thing twice. Like I got out of that commercial world as fast as I could, started doing boot camp, started doing independent contracting, then started working in like the resort setting, and now I'm teaching, right? I got out of the traditional 24-hour LA Fitness, like that stuff. I've only done that for a few years. And by the way, again, I'm really grateful for it. And I think everybody should experience it at some point. It builds work ethic. It's its own type of lesson. It's all that life experience stuff that your grandparents talked about. So like, I am grateful for that. But, every time you start working in a place like that, they're like, great, you're hired. Let's do this. What hours can you work? Can you work from 6 a.m. to like 8 a.m.? And then can you work from like 2 p.m. to 4 p.m.? And then we'll get you again at like 11 p.m. to like midnight. And it's like, you're driving back, it sucks. But on the flip side, if you work really hard, you are successful at your sales, you follow your systems, you learn how to like schedule your clients. I got rid of that split shift crap in 1 month in every place I've ever worked. Every time somebody is like, we're going to have you do the 6 a.m. shift and the 6 p.m. because those are the two busy times, right? Early morning before work and late at night after work. And when I first started working, I was literally working 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. That was my split. It was brutal. Ended it in a 1 month time. I was like, I built up my client list in that first month and was like, great, I can live on that with just the one morning shift. See you later, evening. Moved all my clients over to somebody else. So you can do that. You will have control the more clients you get. And that will, that's when you are more independent. And again, that's what's like working in a place like that. You eventually nothing your company. You're just a cog in the wheel, and you don't need help from them. They don't need help from you. So next place, other than large scale gyms, you got medium sized, and these are great. These are actually some of my favorite places to work. Medium sized fitness centers. So this is probably, if I had to make an assumption, probably similar to like where you're working out at, Maggie, right? Is it a chain? Are there multiple locations? Nope, just the one place, right? So it's niche and it's medium size, right? Do you know the owners? Have you met the owners personally?
Oh yeah, I train with the owner.
Oh, there you go. See, right? Like that is what it's like to work in like medium-sized places. Usually like the owner is directly involved. A lot of times like management is somebody that you actually work with. A lot of times that manager is also somewhat your competition sometimes. They're your manager and they're obviously going to support you, but at the same time, they often have, clients as well. They're usually pulling double duty. They're still working as a trainer, but at the same time, like, they're the one who onboards people. So these are often smaller operated, usually 1 or 2 locations at the most, but they're independently owned. So when we're looking at it, they are independently owned, usually 1 or 2 locations, right? A lot of times they're located in less densely populated areas. These are usually outside of you're not going to find a lot of these medium-sized places attached to a Jamba Juice. You know, a lot of times these will be kind of be in their own little area in more like suburban areas. So located in less densely populated areas, right? They will offer the same equipment. I'm not going to put that up here, but they do offer the same commercial grade strength equipment. Like you're going to see all the normal good stuff in there. They're going to run themselves actually fairly similarly to large scale gyms. They will have a similar pay structure as large scale facilities. So they may be run by like a mom and pop, you know, they may be like a mom and pop gym, but they actually will pay very, very similarly to those large scale gyms, because honestly, like that's how those large scale gyms got to be where they are. And so a lot of times, like that's what these places are striving to be. The last time I mentioned this, somebody was talking about how it's like when you hear of one of those those street side like restaurants becoming like finally like a brick and mortar restaurant, and then eventually they become like a chain. And then we were talking about Dave's Hot Chicken. Like Dave's Hot Chicken went from like being a streetcar thing to being like a little pop-up to being like 4 restaurants, and I guarantee you they're gonna explode. They're gonna be the next freaking McDonald's, because that stuff is delicious. Anyway, they will often have fewer amenities. A lot of times they're not going to have like a pool, or maybe they won't have like all of the stuff that those commercial places have. You know, like Crunch, every time I go into Crunch, the person at the front desk like, you gonna use the massage today? And I'm like, no. It's like those little like beds that you lay on and it shoots you with like water jets. It's like, I'm good. But like, I get it. Like they have that, they're offering it because they're trying to appeal to a wide range of people. Those little amenities, usually you're not going to find those in smaller scale gyms. And they are often focused, is the best part, on efficient workouts. So a lot of times they have less machines and more free weights. So you are going to see a little bit less of like, you know, maybe like that silly freaking delt machine like this, right? Well, we got dumbbells. You can do delt raises. It's the same thing, you know. They won't have a lot of that. Like they'll be a little more efficient with less equipment. So they will have commercial grade equipment, but you will often have to share a lot of space with, you know, other trainers a lot of times, or members if they are there. Your revenue source is usually from memberships. This is the same concept here. Personal training is not the primary source of income for places like this. They won't have quite as many specialties. Usually not going to see like a juice bar or a cafe or anything like that. But because they are like a mom and pop situation, they will often be more well known in the community. So if you are looking for, you know, if you're like a networker, if you're the king or queen of schmooze, you can probably do really well in a place like this. If you know the people in your community, this is a great place for you to maybe work. Common clientele. Okay, apparently those are 2 words. So usually financially conservative, very similarly, right? A lot of times these membership fees are the same as like commercial fitness gyms. So financially conservative clients who are looking for, you know, a good deal, usually focused on actually working out. The nice thing about like medium-sized place is if somebody's a member, they are probably a little more serious. Rather than like LA, I'm not saying people at LA Fitness aren't serious about getting results, or people at 24-hour Fitness aren't serious about results, but like generally if they sought out a small community medium-sized facility like this, a lot of times they're a little more serious about like training. Focused on the ability to actually work out. That being said, if they often can't get what they're looking for, if like a certain machine is full every time, that can sometimes lead to some friction. So that's something to also be aware of. Sometimes they'll join for a specific class if classes are offered in a place like this. May join for a specific class or staff member, AKA you. A lot of times people will get their membership and you're going to hear this probably within your first 6 months. You're going to have a client who's like, ugh, I kind of hate this place now. And you're going to be working with them like mid-session. They're like, they charged me on this for my account and blah, blah. And they're going to get really frustrated. And you're going to be there as this like weird middle person. You're like, you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you, but you also want to keep your client happy. And you're going to be like, yeah, well, that's part of the, and they're going to be like, the only reason I even stay here is because I like working with you as like my trainer. So a lot of times, like, because of that, gyms become, these medium-sized places, they become aware of that. They treat you well. They will treat you well. A lot of times, like, you are the reason for their retention. And remember, retention is the #1 way gyms make their money. And then a lot of times, you'll see a lot of like college athletes here. Teenage athletes, college students, working professionals, and seniors. So you'll see a little bit less of the family thing, and that's usually just because most of these places usually don't have like a kids club. So it's really hard for like working class families to be able to like, have a place to drop their kids off. But what that leads to is like a lot of people who are actually there, again, to actually, work out, and that's their main goal. So we're also going to see organizational settings are going to be really similar, just a little more personal. Oregon. So what you will often see is similar to large scale locations. So they'll do the same thing. A lot of times in most commercial gyms and medium-sized gyms, you are a trainer. Your direct manager is usually the fitness manager, and then they answer. They usually work in tandem with like the operations manager. That's the person who's usually in charge of managing people at the front desk, and then they'll work usually with like the sales manager, and they're the person who's in charge of like managing the sales. So usually the 3 managers that you'll have in most commercial gyms are the operations manager, training manager, and sales manager. And sometimes that sales manager doesn't even exist. They're just under operations. So usually you'll answer directly to just like the training manager. But you got to remember, like, know who that operations manager is. They're usually the head honcho at most gyms. Maybe there will be another manager on top of that is in charge of everybody. But in medium-sized fitness facilities, that is usually like the owner, or a co-owner. So it's a little less complex. You won't have quite so many tiers, and oftentimes you'll know the owner of the gym. So those are our 2 kind of most common standard regular old gyms. Now we'll kind of look at like small group training facilities. So this right here is an example of like, you can see there's a picture of like a TRX studio. This gym has a couple cubbies over here, a front door, and there's probably a bathroom that we can't see, and probably a desk with a computer. That's it. Like, people show up, they're here to do a TRX class and get the heck out of there. Same thing is true of Orange Theory. You walk into an Orange Theory, there's like a bathroom, there's some lockers, there's a front desk, and there's the gym. Like, that's it. There's no hot tub, there's no showers. Like, it's just simple. People show up for their hour and they get back in their car and go home. A lot of CrossFit boxes are like this, right? They're often very niche. So they often rely on smaller equipment. Small group training. So these are often going to be smaller in size, usually focusing on like one type of equipment or limited types of equipment, focused on smaller equipment. There are so many weirdo group exercise things out there, by the way. I feel like there's less of them now. They kind of we kind of weeded them out. But man, for a little while there, and there were all these weird like fitness niches out there. I remember like compiling a list and being like, I'm gonna go Groupon hopping for like a year-long period and just like try all these weird things out. Do you guys ever see Fitwall? Fitwall is like, they're still around, but they're like a very weird niche thing. Check this out. It's this studio filled with these ladders that attach to a cable machine. And like, it's not a bad type of boot camp. Like, I'm not saying it's bad, but it's very niche, like, you know. And so if you were to open like a studio like this, all you would have to do would be to like get a studio space, put up a couple of those walls, and start offering memberships, you know. Let's see, what was some of the other ones, like the Flywheel group exercise classes. Yeah, Flywheel Sports. These they're like a spin class, except they're on like the Flywheel bike. Seriously, you don't have pictures? Come on, there we go. Oh wait, Flywheel is the normal spin bike. Oh, what's the one with the arms one? The air bike. The ones that actually got the arm stuff, or yeah, Assault air bike. Show you a picture here. But you'll see classes that just, you know, a little studio. You buy a bunch of these, put them in that studio, bada bing, bada boom, you're done. TRX classes are a really good one. So these were springing up like crazy. There was oh, here's one of my favorites. I forgot. I always look this up in this class. Surf group exercise classes. Have you guys seen this? This is where they have like a little surfboard attached to these like Bosu ball looking things. And so it's like a group exercise class where you act as if you are like on a surfboard. Learn more, come on. No, that's actually a picture of surfing. There it is. So it's just kind of like, and it attaches like, it's got little resistance band attachment sites. So you can like be on this like surfboard and like, as if you are, you know, unbalanced. That's Surf Set. There's another company that literally has sand in the class. There's literally one of them that has actual sand. Sandbox Fitness. Yeah, look at this. Yep, that's a group exercise. That's a very niche group exercise class. Probably a pretty good workout, you know. Like that, like that, you know. That's the TRX plank there. That's no joke. That's a hardcore exercise.
No, but let me ask you a question. How would that play out right now with COVID-19? I mean, you know, all that sand there.
I don't know.
I mean, I don't think they have much of a business left. I mean, you know, some people are so paranoid.
God, probably. Yeah, I have no idea. That niche stuff is always usually the first to go, you know, I would assume, yeah. Times like this. But just because like they rely on we're even going to see this in a second. They really rely on like the loyalty of their clients, you know. And you guys are probably part of this, you know, like we're all loyal to the things that we like the most, you know. Like I don't go to any of these group exercise classes personally. But you guys know how much I love Ultimate Frisbee. You know, like you guys know how much I love like going for a run. Maggie, you love boxing. Karina, I know you're a yoga person. So like, you know, I
miss yoga so much. Like, do you know, like they're not open at all, right? Any Bikram yoga studio? Like I call.
No, they're not. They're not. Hey, Brad, what about a boomerang? You ever use one of those?
No, I don't know that one. A boomerang?
Yeah.
Oh, do you mean like an actual boomerang?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I hucked one when I was a kid.
Sorry, I caught you off guard. But no, I was asking because you're into the Frisbee thing. You ever do the boomerang? I mean.
No.
No.
I'm a purist. I don't even do Frisbee golf.
Okay.
Frisbee golf is like, you have these special Frisbee golf discs. And I like, if you can convince me to play frisbee golf, which good luck.
Okay.
I will often use a regular frisbee when I go out there.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't want to screw up my throw, as I'm already not a very good handler.
Oh, okay.
And frisbee golf is like walking. It's like golf, and I don't think golf is that interesting.
Right.
Controversial opinion. I'm not saying it's a bad sport. I'm just saying it does not appeal to me. The most fun I've ever had golfing is when I got my dad and I a golfing thing for Christmas one time, because I thought it'd be kind of a unique gift. And my parents were in Palm Springs at the time, which meant that, there are millions of amazing old golfers that do it. That's all they do all day. And so like when we showed up, they were like, all right, so your tee time is 1:26 p.m. And then, the one behind you will be 1:31. It was like 5 minutes of time. And I was like, like, it's definitely going to take more than 5 minutes per hole. Like, we are horrible. And my dad looked at me and he was like, we got to move. So the whole time we were like, it was like, don't line up your shot, just hit it and run. And so like, literally, like, I was like, you use the cart, and I was like running. And I actually had a really good time. I thought that was pretty fun. Like speed golf. I enjoyed that. It was like, wow, just like keep getting on the move. But that's just me. So niche activities. A lot of times people like Karina, I could hear it in your voice. You were heartbroken that hot yoga is not back.
This is all getting to me. I'm not gonna lie. This is all starting to get to me.
But we all, you get really passionate about the thing that you love. And so that's the type of clientele you're going to have here. A lot of times you will be having the same clients. They'll stick with you for years. They often occupy storefronts. That's another thing. So a lot of times it'll be like, here's your TRX studio and there's a 7-Eleven. A lot of times because they don't really need that very specific space. They just need kind of an empty room. And then they focus on niche activities and therefore have few amenities. These are great places to work. They often pay really well for your hour. So there's a high level of, there's a small number of trainers, like employees, which is great, but makes it very hard to get into places like this. Getting hired in places like this can be kind of challenging just because it is so niche, and a lot of times people will stay there for years. I mean, think of like your yoga class, right? Like you see the same people, same faces for years at a time, because a lot of times like this isn't somebody's main gig. It's just something that like is a little bit of extra income. So very, very common thing you'll see there. So common clientele, enjoy group settings. So a lot of times you're getting people who, the big draw for them was the fact that they're working out around a lot of people. And so they often view exercise as a social activity. They prefer being led by a trainer. So you're looking for people who, they want to take it out. They are looking to, turn their brain off for an hour, go get a great workout and leave, and that's great because if that tells you something that you can market towards. You can bring that person in. If you're trying to sell somebody on getting a membership to a place like this, and you're reading that person and you're talking to them and they're like, yeah, I'm really just looking for, something simple. And it's like, great, well, birds fly, fish swim. We have class every day at 6:30. So if you walk in the door at 6:25, you can turn your brain off for an hour, burn a bunch of calories. Cool. That appeals to me. I love stuff like that. I love not having to worry about like scheduling something. I like it when something takes place at the same time every day. And a lot of times these are people who are very value minded. So these are often young professionals who are value minded. What we mean by that is they find the come as often as you like approach very appealing. Again, I'm going to use yoga studios as an example of for this, but a lot of times like yoga is sold like per session. Like maybe you'll have an 8-session package, but a lot of times you can just buy the unlimited package and you can go as many times as you want. Last year, as sort of like a fun little challenge for myself, I decided to go to a hot yoga class. I got an unlimited membership and I was like, I'm going to go for 30 days uninterrupted. And I literally didn't miss a day. Even went on, they did a little turkey challenge. It was in November. So they were even open for one class on Thanksgiving Day. And I had to make sure that I made it to that class. But that was great. I got my freaking money's worth, you know? I paid one fee, went as many times as possible, you know? So a lot of times it's people who are find that kind of approach appealing, very value-minded. Organizational settings are definitely, this is going to be all over the place. There's no rule for how these are going to usually be organized. You know, that means that they're going to be all over the place. You're going to have maybe a manager in one place who actually teaches classes, or maybe you'll have an owner that's never present. It's going to be very challenging to kind of make a general rule of thumb for places like this. So that can be more, that one other thing is it can be more challenging to get into a place like this. You will often require specific certifications. I was just talking to one of our students the other day who was thinking about like getting a yoga certification, but a lot of times certain yoga studios will require specific training in like specific types of yoga in order for you to be able to work there. So that's true in places like this as well. You will often, it can be challenging to get into a place like this due to low turnover rate and specialized certification requirements, right? So a lot of times you will have, you know, you'll need to have, if you want to work in a TRX studio, you've got to have actual TRX certification. You walk in there and you're like, well, I have a War Machine certification. By the way, War Machine is basically like a TRX competitor. They're like a different brand. And it's like, that's suspension training, or like I've taken a suspension training course through, you know, whatever. And they're like, nope, we are a TRX facility. If you don't have a TRX certification, we're not interested, you know? And it's like, at the end of the day, it's because like that class is meant to be taught one specific way. I should teach that class the same way you should teach that class, the same way she teaches that class, right? And so that means that we all need to have the same certs. So sometimes that can be a little challenging to get in. But again, guys, the hourly is worth it. These places usually pay pretty well. And then we got the bougie stuff. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. I didn't know you were a yogi, Nancy. So yeah, speaking of, the next one we got to look at, boutique, the bougie gyms. Let's talk about Equinox. One? No, one more. So a lot of times people will kind of jump straight to like, this is where they want to work. They're like, I want to work at Equinox. Equinox has the prestige, you know, they probably pay more. They do, they pay a pretty good hourly rate. But you got to remember, they also charge higher. You know, you're not just making a higher, you're making the same percentage of the income. It's just that the members are paying more per training session. So if you have limited sales ability, you might not be able to sell a membership at a place like Equinox. Or you might not be comfortable charging that much per session. So it's definitely a trade-off there. But the range and scope is generally small. Equinox is honestly kind of an exception to the rule. Usually boutique fitness facilities, there's not a lot of locations. Range in size and scope, generally smaller. They serve a niche segment, AKA they serve people who are usually doing financially very, very well. Not as many as you would expect to see in a lot of a large-scale gym environment. They usually specialize in specific forms of training. And what I mean by that is often have in-house certifications. So Equinox is like this, for instance. Equinox actually has Equinox Academy, which teaches you how to get, I don't know, Equinox core training level 1, blah, blah, blah. You know, I don't know what their classes are called. But they have very specific training that is only like their brand of stuff. Now, remember, that is not going to be an NCCA certification. So it might not serve you once you leave a place like Equinox, which is kind of the point, actually. But that's, you know, they often have like these in-house certifications. They want their trainers to know how to do stuff specifically. They often also have like that upscale luxury feel and membership cost, and often feel exclusive and private, right? So they are kind of appealing to people who want that luxury feel, you know? Me personally, the very few times that, you know, what'll often happen is like you'll be courted by a place like Equinox. They will often kind of come around and, you know, if you're out scouting for jobs and things like that, they'll often like be like, well, why don't you come in? Here's like a 30-day thing, you know, and come see what it's like, and then maybe we'll get you on board. I love it the few times that I've gone in there, but at the same time, like that's just not the style of trainer that I am. Like to me, working out is difficult and blood, sweat, and tears, you know? Like I like being dirty. I like leaving the gym messy, you know? Like to me, that's kind of what I think working out is. I'm not saying that is what it is. I'm just saying that's my personal opinion of it. So when I go to an Equinox, I feel awkward, you know? It feels weird to me to sweat on the floor. Like I gotta wipe it up afterwards, which you should be wiping up your sweat. But like it just feels weird to me. So not really my style of gym, but if that's the boutique feel that you're going for, go for it. It's a great place to work. They actually do support you really well. And they'll teach you, there's a lot to be learned at a place like Equinox. They will retool their version of a lot of the fitness assessments that we teach you guys. Equinox has its own little twist on a lot of those things, and they'll teach it to you. And so that's kind of fun and can only add to your skills, you know? So they're going for a resort type feel. Sometimes it can be difficult to build membership in places like this because it is kind of expensive. And usually places like this are located near like business centers. These are usually located like downtown. I mean, in LA, they're actually in a lot of different places, but like generally when you in like more like, you know, LA is like the largest metropolitan area freaking ever. But like in a lot of other large cities, they'll usually be located like near the business centers. So common clientele, bougie, typically very affluent. So these are usually people who are doing pretty well financially. They are people who prefer a resort style feel and luxury amenities. And a big thing here is they value undivided attention. This is the type of place where you really do not want to be on your phone. These people are used to paying for like specific services from somebody. So if you are not giving them your undivided attention, they're not going to feel like they're getting what they paid for, and you're going to lose that client. So that is something to definitely be aware of. Organizational settings we need to be aware of. Definitely a higher membership price. So trainers must be comfortable charging those prices, right? Definitely something to be aware of there. If you're not going to be comfortable with that because maybe you're just starting out, you know, by the way, you guys are going to get courted by Equinox pretty quickly. Equinox loves Sochi. We have a really good relationship with them. They think our students are the bee's knees. So like, definitely like something to be aware of. However, the one thing that I hear from a lot of our students sometimes is like right out the gate, they might not be comfortable with those Equinox prices. So that's definitely something. And usually, by the way, when it comes to like, this is something I'm going to bring up again when we get to the sales area. You could charge $1,000 an hour as long as you are worth it. You know, a lot of times I hear trainers, like the biggest mistake I see most new students make, we will do a day where we do like fake pricing sheets and stuff where it's like, what do you think you're going to charge for your membership prices? The biggest mistake I see most students make is not charging enough for their sessions. A lot of people are like, I don't know, 30 an hour. And it's like, hey, that sounds like a good hourly rate, but like $30 for a personal training session, I mean, that's doing that's pretty inexpensive, you know? And you got to remember, you've got overhead costs. You might not be able to, and you got to pay both sides of your taxes. You might not be able to live on $30 an hour. That's, you know, so that's like, well, I'm just not comfortable charging $60 an hour. And a lot of times when people think about that, there's $70 or $100 an hour. And it's like, you may not feel very comfortable charging that much, but like, are you worth it? Because, you know, I just got done teaching you and I think you're worth it. Like, if you're doing everything that we taught you in school, you're worth way more than $30 an hour. Like, and so that's sometimes something people are uncomfortable with when they first get into a place like this. You got to be aware, like these memberships cost a lot, but trust me, you are worth it. Like, you know what you're talking about. You are more valuable. That's what you're selling. You're selling your value. So members will expect a very specialized skill sets, which is good because you have them. So these members are going to expect that you are above the other, like you are a higher tier of trainer, which again, coming from Sochi, that's why Equinox likes us so much. You are going to be. You're walking out of the door with 3 certifications, right? Your regular CPT, nutrition, and corrective. Most trainers like start with just the one, and then they slowly build those skills over time. So that's a big part of like what kind of gives you a leg up. And then the organizational structure is really similar to like small group studios. Organizational structure generally similar to small boutique group training studios. Now, that is 100% not even remotely true at Equinox, which again is the kind of first example that we think of. So Equinox is the exception. Equinox is this really kind of unique company. They have taken the best parts of like 24-hour fitness and Golds and places like that. They've taken the best parts of that and turned it and used it in a boutique high-end setting. Most places that are like boutique, usually you know the manager directly. You know the owner a lot of times even. Like you are, you know, the organizational setting is much smaller a lot of times, similar to like small group training studios. But Equinox is definitely not like that. Equinox has like a training manager, a sales manager, like they have different managers. They have that classic organizational pyramid. And then they have like a corporate office and they have the gym office, you know, like those are 2 different sections. So they're very different than that. And I know that's the most common example you're going to see. So I just wanted to address that. All right. So those are the gyms you're going to work at if you decide to work in a gym. Now, talking about job hunting, obviously you want to be able to like assess what the first thing you need to do when you're hunting for a job is figure out like where you want to work. Hopefully today we filled in, like gave you an idea of like how many options there are out there. We're not done. Obviously we got to talk about like what it's like to be an independent contractor. But you do want to assess like your values and like what's important to you. You know, like me, I am not super comfortable working in like a bougie, super high-end facility. It's just not the type of person that I am. And so like, you know, when I got hired by Equinox and worked there for like 2 weeks, I was super uncomfortable and was like, I'm out of here. Like, I was like 22 at the time and way more, I mean, maybe I'd fit in there now that I'm like a little older and a little more, you know, conservative in my ways, I guess. But like at the time I was like, nope, not interested. Flushed out of there really, really, really quick. So you got to assess like what's important to you, like what type of environment are you going to thrive in, you know? I like working in a place that, you know, I can kind of get down and dirty. And then what are your strengths? You know, what are you good at? Are you good at working with like senior clients? Are you good at working with youths? What type of gym is going to have more of that population? What type of gym is going to focus on corrective exercise? You guys are all going to be pretty good at that by the time you get out of here. Where are you going to be rewarded for that? You know, there's a couple different hunting websites out there. There's obviously places like monster.com that requires a membership fee. I'm not a huge fan of monster.com. Indeed.com is definitely like the most common. Craigslist is still a great place to do some job hunting. One of the best ones is this one right here. If you go to nasm.org, they actually have a job board, which is this little, like, basically you're going to throw in your category. Let's say you want to be a personal trainer, and then you throw in your zip code. Yeah, the freaking pandemic. Normally there are going to be companies here where, you know, places have, can we just go with any? Good Lord, no jobs in my zip code. All right, well, again, like normally there are jobs up there. This freaking weird world we're in right now. It's a really good resource, something to definitely like look into. And you know that they are definitely accepting, you know, NASM style personal trainers because they're on NASM's website. I definitely recommend making an online presence like LinkedIn or certain social media. Social media, by the way, you want to make sure, my recommendation for you is to have a separate social media that is your personal training one, unless you are not posting anything that's compromising on your regular. I don't even like social media personally, but I even have like a training version of myself that is online that is not my normal social media stuff. So personal website, Facebook, Instagram, things like that. If you have those things, make sure that like there's not a picture of you at your cousin's birthday party doing shots, you know, like that does not say personal trainer. And then there's independent contracting. So we'll kind of leave off with this as sort of like what we're going to talk about later. So an independent contractor is a person who, you know, works for a specific service under a verbal or written agreement, right? Like, you know, let's say a gym needs drywalling done. They're going to hire an independent contractor to come in and do that. You know, that person's not an employee. They're an independent contractor. A lot of gyms will allow you to be an independent contractor and they'll do the billing for you, which is pretty cool. And you'll just pay rent. USA Fitness has a little bit of that. You know, there's more and more of those USA Fitness popping up there. You actually pay them to be allowed to work in their gym. $900 a month, I think, is what it costs. And then you can sell your training memberships for whatever price you want, and you're an independent contractor. They'll do the billing for you as like a service, which is great because then you don't have to worry about like taking credit cards and stuff. And then they just give you all the money. And you can charge whatever you want. You can run your sessions however you want. You can wear whatever you want. They don't have any rules on that kind of stuff. You're basically paying rent to use their gym. So if you don't have your own gym, that can be a really great place to work. There's a lot of trainers' gyms out there. We'll talk about more about those when we get into independent contracting. Or maybe you train out of somebody's house. A lot of times you'll need to have like portable fitness equipment, and you can do that as well. So, and then there's also owning a facility, which we will also talk about later. Maybe you are interested in getting your own facility out there and opening your own gym. I think that's a great idea. You know, if that you have complete control, you know, like you are the boss, you know. So, you know, there's some disadvantages. Obviously, the overhead costs are your responsibility. Hiring is your responsibility. Marketing is your responsibility. But there's definitely advantages to like you being in charge, you know? So definitely something to consider. And that is about it, guys. Any questions today? How's everybody feeling? Pretty good. It's a little bit different than some of our other classes. This is our most, I think, unique class. I think this is different than any other class we've got.
I think it's a great class.
Sparser. What's that?
It's a great class. It's a great class.
Okay.
I think it's important. I really appreciate this course because, you know, I've been around the fitness industry for a long time, and nothing out there really shows you direction like Sochi does. I mean, Sochi puts it all perfect in a sense. It lines you up.
Dude,
I mean,
yeah, I feel like I still learn something new every now and then. I'm like,
yeah,
that exists, you know, like,
yeah.
But yeah, like, you know, we want you to know, and the other thing is like, we do also want you to be prepared. Tomorrow, we're going to start talking about cover letters. So we're going to focus primarily on the like getting hired part for the first half of class. And then we'll talk about the like being an independent contractor, being an owner for like the second half of the course. So we're going into cover letters tomorrow. There's very little notes tomorrow, but the worksheet will, you know, walk you through how to do it. And I'm going to have a specific format. This is probably not going to be through Canvas because Canvas doesn't really support this style of thing. It'll probably be like an editable Google Doc that I'm going to have to send you. And that way you guys can do it on your phones and stuff. So that may require a Gmail account. But yeah, Kenny, I mean, like,
Yeah.
this stuff, you know, this is the stuff that sometimes you don't learn out of your book, you know?
Oh, no, no, definitely not.
Your book's designed to teach you how to be a great trainer, but sometimes it doesn't tell you how to get hired as a trainer.
Exactly, which is a big part. You know?
Yeah. So, all right. If you guys don't have any questions, we'll go ahead and end today's call, and I will see everybody tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Stay safe out there, guys.
Likewise.
Rod,
Yeah.
I had a question about the assessments yesterday.
Yeah.
So you know how we did like the Davies test and we did the pull test and push test. Now, are those tests done multiple times with a rest in between?
The Davies test is, and the Sharks test is.
Okay.
We didn't do Sharks yesterday because we didn't have a grid. But
Right.
like that, you know, that jumping test, those
Yeah.
are both done. Shark, you do one practice round for each leg, and then you do 2 tests for each leg.
Okay.
Davies
and then-
test, you do 3 rounds, and you do 60 seconds of rest in between every one. But they're all 15 seconds.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Thanks.
No problem. We'll see everybody tomorrow. I'm going to end the recording.